All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Jackie Benestante, and I'm the Executive Director at the Autism Society of Texas. And today we are presenting medical cannabis, autism as a qualifying condition in the Texas Compassionate Use Program. And joining us is Zachary Franckhauser, the Trulieve Licensing Associate, and also Dr. William Troutt, who is the Trulieve Medical Director. And they're going to explain things to you about this program. And we'll have a couple of different spots for Q&A. So we'll be taking questions if you want to type them into Facebook or even private message us on Facebook if you don't want to share personal information. And we'll stop about midway and answer questions, and we'll stop again at the end and answer questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Trulieve and Zach now. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Super excited to be doing this with the Autism Society of Texas. My name is Zach Franckhauser. I'm a representative for Trulieve. I've been with Trulieve since 2016 when we first originated, headquartered in Tallahassee, Florida. I actually live in Jacksonville, Florida myself now. I find myself on our licensing team, which all that is helping Trulieve expand into states where we have not obtained a license yet, or will hopefully have one in the future, such as the state of Texas. I've been with Trulieve, since the beginning when we first had our first dispensary in Tallahassee, all the way now to 184 different dispensaries located in 11 different states, recently opening in Georgia and soon, hopefully, in Ohio. And we also have with us today our wonderful medical director, Dr. William Troutt. Dr. Troutt, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit before we jump in.
Certainly. Thank you, Zach. My name is William Troutt, and I am the lead medical director for Trulieve, based out of Arizona. And my main role is to provide education for our staff and the patients that we serve, and coordinate our team of medical professionals that we have throughout the country. And Zach and I are very excited to be here today with the Texas Autism Society to discuss cannabis and autism and the Texas program and answer any questions that anybody may have.
Absolutely. And, to kind of start off, just want to talk a little bit about Trulieve again and our endeavors into Texas, starting with, Texas originally had their medical cannabis program adopted in 2015. With that, there have been 3 companies within the state that have been providing medicine to now approximately 50,000 patients with around 800 different physicians in the state. Texas does allow for virtual telemedicine. So with it being so big, of course, it makes it a little easier for patients to see physicians for medical cannabis to obtain that prescription. Texas is different in the fact that they don't actually prescribe or provide medical cannabis cards. They actually provide a medical cannabis prescription for different qualifying conditions, as you see on the left here. Throughout the years, it really only started with epilepsy. Then we started to see the program expand a little bit, later on adding autism as a qualifying condition, thanks to efforts from people like Jackie and the Autism Society of Texas. With that said, Texas will soon also be expanding their medical program, hopefully soon, and have companies such as Trulieve within the state to provide quality medicine to patients and really provide patient access, which is one of our biggest things for patients in each state that we operate in. Discussing a little bit more about Texas, you'll see again as the qualifying conditions are on the left side. Many patients may think that they do not qualify for cannabis, but that is sometimes often misunderstood. There are often many other conditions that are associated with these qualifying medical conditions that will allow patients to be prescribed medical cannabis. With that said, you will have to be a state resident. You must be 18 or older, certified by a registered physician within the state. You can find these physicians on the Texas Cannabis Use website. Through that, the physician would be able to prescribe the medication to one of the 3 different operators within Texas, allowing that patient to obtain medication, which we'll go over shortly. All right. With that said, Trulieve coming to Texas, this will allow a lot of job opportunities throughout the state. We will also be able to partner with local education and training institutions. This will help with research. This will help with economic growth. and being able to better serve patients and help them with information regarding medical cannabis and their qualifying condition. Working with universities is especially a large opportunity for us because, again, it allows for people like Dr. Troutt to be able to better explain why certain cannabinoids may work for certain qualifying conditions, why certain products, terpenes, and other items within the plant may help for patients who qualify for medical cannabis. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Texas will soon be expanding their program. This was actually recently voted on April 11th, and it was approved by a House committee. We're still waiting for it to be scheduled on the calendars to be approved throughout the state, which will then all effects would take change September 1st. This would be huge because it allows chronic pain that would otherwise be treated with prescription opioids. As many people are aware, the opioid epidemic has been pretty taxing on many people. Medical cannabis has been found to really help patients who are, addicted to opioids be able to wean off of those. So this is wonderful because it will really allow for more patients to also qualify without having to take certain items such as opioids. Currently within Texas, it is a 1% THC cap. So many of your products are low THC, hence the low THC cannabis program within Texas. But we're soon hoping to see them institute a volumetric dose of 10 milligrams. The THC cap, essentially, if you had a gummy that was 1 gram, it would only allow for 10 milligrams within that gummy. So pretty low dose, doesn't always provide the best effects. So we are hopeful that will be approved and better products will be available to patients in the market. Currently, the Texas program is operated by Texas Department of Public Safety. They have approved for the Department of State Health Services to add additional qualifying conditions. That way we don't have to wait every 2 years for when Texas goes into session. Session should hopefully be ending soon, and about July or August, we'll hopefully know whether or not these changes will take effect, and we'll hopefully know whether or not Trulieve will be in Texas as well.
All right, so medical cannabis. Cannabis sativa L. This is the botanical name for the plant, and it was first officially named from a scientific purpose by Carl von Linnaeus in his Species Planetarium in 1753. And sativa actually means cultivated. So this was a cultivated species of cannabis he was describing. And that's significant because many people believe that cannabis was actually the first plant that was cultivated when humans went from hunters and gatherers to agrarian cultures or agrarian societies because of all the resources that cannabis provides, not just medicine, but food from the seed and clothing from the fiber and fuel from the oils. So again, an incredibly resource-rich plant that has provided so much throughout human culture. And then Jean-Baptiste Lamarck proposed a second species of cannabis in 1785 called Cannabis indica, that was a wild species growing more in eastern regions around India. And then there's other species or types that have been proposed, like ruderalis, but the conventional wisdom is that there's one species of cannabis, Cannabis sativa L, again, the L named after Linnaeus, and then other subtypes of cannabis that may have different constituents and different size and shape and potentially different uses because of that. As far as our American history, we've got a very complex history with this plant. A lot of people don't realize this still, but cannabis was our main cash crop in this country right up until the late 1930s. Everything was made out of this plant in this country. First American flag was made from the cannabis plant. First draft of our Constitution written on cannabis paper. All of the newspapers in this country were cannabis. First Levi Strauss jeans were cannabis. the sails on the boats that brought us here to the New World, all of the rope, cannabis. In fact, that term canvas comes from the word cannabis. It was part of our United States medical pharmacopoeia right up until the 1940s. In fact, cannabis was one of the main prescribed medicines in this country right up until the late 1940s, with products like this tincture you see here, which in fact are very close to the types of medicines that an individual will find on the shelves at dispensaries. And then obviously prohibition started in the late 1930s, but starting in the late 1990s, these states were passing medical cannabis programs. And these are people initiative where people have gone out, citizens, and gotten signatures on the ballots and passed these laws. So this is our democratic process in work. And it's very exciting to see. Now we're up to over 40 states that have some type of medical cannabis program, and up to 22 states that allow just adult use, or what are sometimes called recreational cannabis programs. There are about 20 states that do allow autism as a qualifying condition. These states over here on the left, including Texas, autism is a specific qualifying condition. And these other states that are listed on the right just allow a physician to recommend cannabis for any other type of medical condition that they believe cannabis would benefit. So why is this medicine so special from a medical standpoint? Cannabinoids, these are very special compounds that we find quite abundantly in the cannabis plant. And these cannabinoids are quite unique as far as how they work. And there are many of these cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. We talk about THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, and CBD, cannabidiol, most often. Those are the two most common cannabinoids, but there are up to 100 of these cannabinoids, and we believe that they are all working together to provide the greatest medicinal benefit that people get from these whole plant medicines. So THC is the one that gets the most attention. It is the one that causes those psychoactive or euphoric effects, or what some people call being high. That one you have to be a little more careful with dosing, because if you get too much of it in the system, it can cause some impairments. However, this is a very safe medicine. Even THC, it's believed that people cannot consume enough of it to actually have a lethal overdose. So even though it's a very powerful medicine, it is a very safe medicine from a toxicity standpoint. And THC has been is known to help with pain, things like muscle spasms, stimulating appetite, with nausea and vomiting and sleep. CBD, cannabidiol, the second most common cannabinoid, and it does not have those euphoric effects that are associated with THC. So non-impairing the CBD molecule of the cannabis plant. And it's known to balance out the nervous system, help with certain anxiety. It has anti-inflammatory qualities to it, neuroprotective qualities, interestingly enough, protects the nervous system and brain cells. In fact, even THC is known to be neuroprotective. So all that stuff we've heard about THC or smoking pot killing brain cells, absolutely not true. And it looks like it is just the opposite, that these cannabinoids, again, are quite protective of our nervous system. CBN, cannabinol, is another cannabinoid that you might hear of. It's an interesting one because it's not actually produced by the plant. It's a degradation product of THC. So as THC ages or oxidizes, it converts over to CBN. And CBN is known to be a little more sedative, or has a little more of a sleepy effect to it when it's associated with THC and whole plant medicines. So that might be why older cannabis has a little more of a sleepy effect to it than freshly harvested cannabis. And many people do choose products that have CB in, or types of cannabis that have CB in it for, again, more of that sleepy effect. CBG, cannabigerol, we call that the parent molecule because it's the first cannabinoid the plant produces. And then the plant, depending on what enzymes it uses, it will produce the other cannabinoids from CBG. And CBG has been known to affect the pathways in our body that can help with pain and has anti-inflammatory qualities to it, antioxidant qualities. All of these cannabinoids are known to be very powerful antioxidants. And CBG has also been known to help with nausea and other ailments like that. But like I said, there are up to 100 of these cannabinoids, and we believe that they're all in there working together. I will talk about the cannabinoid acids as well, because first of all, they have big implication on dosing, and you might see these in the dispensary or on test results of products. So when these cannabinoids form in the fresh green plant, they actually have a CO2 molecule attached to it, which makes it an acid group. So THC is really THCA, or tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, in the fresh green plant. And the reason that's important is that THCA is non-psychoactive. So technically, you could eat a large amount of fresh green cannabis and not feel any of those psychoactive effects. So cannabis has to be heated up first to do what we call decarboxylate, remove that CO2 group and make non-psychoactive THCA into psychoactive THC. So the smoking of cannabis throughout history was not an accident. That was to provide the heat to do this reaction and make THCA psychoactive THC. Also, the aging process does it a little bit. That's also probably why people started cooking it into brownies and cookies and other food products like that, because the heat of the oven does this process and makes it that psychoactive property. And the psychoactive part of cannabis is what provides people a lot of relief of their symptoms, just kind of takes the edge off. Many people will say it doesn't totally take my pain away. It gives me this mental distancing from the pain where I can still think about other things and laugh and hang out with my family, not just inundated with the thought of how much pain they're in or the symptoms that they are dealing with. And then CBD, same thing. It has an acid group attached to it before it's heated up, cannabidiolic acid, and that's known to affect things in the body, like have anti-nausea effects, and again, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties as well. The terpenes, this is the part of the plant that gives it its smell or aroma. Terpenes are found throughout nature, and they give other plants those smelly qualities, like that pinene smell, or that pine tree smell, that's pinene, that lemon smell, limonene. And these terpenes are known to have biological activity in very small amounts. Many are known to be antimicrobial, antioxidants, anti-inflammatory. Some have anti-cancer effects. Some have bronchodilator effects. Some are a little more uplifting. Some are a little more sedating. So these terpenoids also give different types of cannabis, different strains or cultivars of cannabis, different qualities, medicinal qualities, and different experiences that go along with them also. We talk about two major types of cannabis. We talk about cannabis sativas and cannabis indicas. The sativas are typically known to be a little more uplifting or a little more energetic, whereas the indica is known to be a little more relaxing or a little more sedative. And again, we believe a big part of that might be the terpene profile that's in these different types of cannabis, or the other cannabinoids as well. But these are very individual to the person using it, as far as that experience that they get. And then the hybrid, which are supposed to be somewhere in the middle, or crosses between those sativa and indica types of cannabis. You may also see cannabis, though, talked about. We're getting a little further away from the sativa and indica because there's so many other components to these cannabis medicines. And we're, from a medicinal standpoint, we're really honing in on the different constituents, or what we call chemotype, the chemotypes of these cannabis strains. You may see type 1, which is just THC dominant types of cannabis. Type 2 are more balanced, so part CBD and part THC. And we talk about those in ratios. So you might see a 1-to-1, which would be 1 part CBD to 1 part THC in that strain of cannabis or type of cannabis product. Type 3 are CBD dominant. So large amounts of CBD, but low amounts of THC. So these are people that would be looking for more of those anti-inflammatory type of effects or anti-anxiety effects, or again, just to get more relief without the psychoactive parts of the medicine. And then there's a type 4 that's been proposed, which are those CBG dominant strains, but we don't see as many of those available in the dispensaries or in nature. And like I said, there's up to 100 plus cannabinoids, a couple hundred terpenes. We've identified over 500 plus different constituents in these different types of cannabis that contribute to the medicinal benefits of it. Now, why is this medicine so special? You can't understand that without understanding this endocannabinoid system. Up until 1990, we really had no idea how cannabis was working. We thought it was just increasing our natural endorphins, which are kind of like the natural opiates our body makes. We thought that's why people felt good from cannabis. However, in 1990, researchers started following the THC molecule in the brain, and they realized it was binding to these very specific spots or receptors on brain cells. And in fact, that's how we identified what we now call cannabinoid receptors. And we didn't even know these receptors existed in our brain until we started looking at how cannabis affects the body. So if nothing else, this cannabis plant is teaching us an incredible amount about how our own human physiology works. And it turns out that you all have more of these cannabinoid receptors in your brain than almost any other type of receptor. Wow, that's incredible. And that says that this is a very important part of how our body functions, is through these cannabinoid receptors. Now, what do these cannabinoid receptors do in our brain? So our brain is an electrical organ. It sends electrical chemical signals down to the body to tell it what to do. Well, if that electrical activity in your brain starts becoming too strong or too erratic, then you start producing these natural endocannabinoids that our body makes, that goes and binds to those cannabinoid receptors upstairs and says, hey, we're way too excitable up there. If you don't get that electrical activity and check upstairs, we're going to have serious problems downstairs. So this endocannabinoid system is how our body regulates the activity of our brain, the electrical chemical activity of our brain. So very, very special. Now it gets a little more complicated. Cannabinoid 1 receptors, brain, spinal cord, so our nervous system, all of your nerves. But then we have a second type of cannabinoid receptors, cannabinoid 2 receptors, that are found all throughout our immune system. So to regulate inflammatory processes and protect our bodies from foreign invaders, our cannabinoid 2 receptors regulate those processes or balance our immune functions and inflammatory processes. So that's one way that we now know that these endocannabinoids, the natural cannabinoids that our body makes, and also these cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, can help to regulate inflammation inside of our bodies. It's a little more complicated. This endocannabinoid system touches all of our other systems as well and helps to regulate them. It can regulate our feel-good hormones, dopamine, serotonin, through their receptors. It can regulate our natural endorphins through their receptors. And that might be why people can use less opiate medicines when they're using cannabis. It helps to regulate our sex hormones. It buffers our stress response. That might be why people with PTSD report such good results with cannabis medicines. So I look at this endocannabinoid system kind of like the conductor of the orchestra. Your body's got this orchestra of all of these different systems. And when one of them starts to get out of balance, your endocannabinoid system starts talking to them through our natural endocannabinoids and those receptors to bring them back into balance. We call that homeostasis in medicine, keeping the body in balance with our environment that is constantly changing. And it looks like your endocannabinoid system is the main player in homeostasis, or keeping all of the systems in your body in balance. That makes it very, very special. So as far as the endocannabinoid system and autism is concerned, so here's a great quote that came from Peter Greenspoon. He's a contributor to Harvard Health Publisher. And he said, the endocannabinoids in our body act like traffic cops to control the levels and activity of most all other neurotransmitters and systems in the body. And this is how they regulate things, by immediate feedback, turning up or down the activity of whichever system needs to be adjusted. And the endocannabinoid signaling in autism, this endocannabinoid system affects things like our social reward responsivity, neural development, circadian rhythms, so those sleep cycles as well, anxiety-related symptoms that are atypical presentations of autism. These are also regulated by the endocannabinoid system. In addition, it controls emotional responses, behavioral reactivity to context, and social interaction. So it can be thought of that alterations in this endocannabinoid system may contribute to autistic characteristics that we see. In fact, looking at individuals with autism, we've seen decreased levels of cannabinoid 1 receptors in the brains of children with autism. We've seen decreased anandamide. So anandamide is that main endocannabinoid that our body makes. And we've seen decreased levels of that in children with autism. Decreased polyunsaturated acids, which support this endocannabinoid system. We see CB2 receptors that are highly expressed in children with autism, and that might be compensatory mechanisms for inflammatory processes that are taking place along with autism. And we also see a high association with autism and anxiety disorders and seizure disorders. And those are 2 things that we know this endocannabinoid system is highly involved with regulating. Therefore, these things suggest that this endocannabinoid system is a very good target to help individuals with autism that are dealing with symptoms associated with it. And in fact, studies are starting to show that individuals with autism are reporting improvements with the use of cannabis. Here's one study with 188 patients. Well, actually, here's a good place to stop to see if anybody has any questions on this endocannabinoid system or the cannabis plant itself. I know we've covered a lot of material so far.
Yeah, so we had a couple of questions. The first one is what is sometimes making people who use this paranoid, like if they have that paranoid feeling, is that, I know you talked quite a bit about the science and the components, and could you speak to that a little bit about how that is that's been removed, or if that's a side effect, or would that be great?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an interesting one, and I'll kind of associate it with alcohol, because looking at how different substances affect us, right? And because we talk about the impairments that come along with different substances, and I know that's very important when cannabis comes in and is legalized in a new state, is how does that impairment affect people? And so alcohol, everybody is very familiar with the effects, right? People are 100 miles an hour and bulletproof, right? Give me the keys, I'm fine, that type of thing. And cannabis impairments are totally opposite. In fact, studies suggest that when people are impaired on cannabis, they have the ability to perceive their impairment. So let that wash over you for a second. So typically when people are impaired on cannabis, they know it. and they have no desire to be behind the wheel of a car or doing anything like that, because they can perceive that impairment. And the fact, like, people that are on alcohol typically speed or drive erratic. People have been shown on cannabis, they actually slow down. They leave more cushion between other cars because, like I said, they perceive that impairment. And I think that goes along with this endocannabinoid system, because the endocannabinoid system is a check and balance system. It's monitoring the nervous system. And when it sees that there's an imbalance, then it starts kicking in to try to correct it. And so those are the types of feelings people get with cannabis based on how this endocannabinoid system works. So the paranoia with people is typically because they can appreciate or perceive that they're either impaired or that they're feeling different or that they are thinking different. And then that kind of those paranoia are those thought processes, right? Do people know that I'm on cannabis, or am I doing things the way I'm supposed to be doing it, right? So that's what's going on with the paranoia with cannabis, or how some people describe that. And everybody doesn't feel that way. Some people are more prone to it than others. And typically that sensation will come with larger amounts of the THC part of the medicine. And again, everybody's different as far as their tolerances for that THC part of the medicine.
Great, thanks for answering that. And then another question we had was, in addition to autism, are anxiety disorders and PTSD considered qualifying conditions?
PTSD is considered a qualifying condition now. It was actually implemented, I believe, in 2021, and they have seen a huge increase in the patient count in Texas from adding that as a qualifying condition. So typically with PTSD, anxiety disorders will be a symptom of that. And so typically many physicians, excuse me, will prescribe patients medication who are experiencing anxiety. So, again, speak with your provider regarding that, but PTSD is a qualifying condition in Texas. And it has actually been a great thing for a lot of the veterans within the community.
Definitely. Okay, great. Thank you. And that's the only questions we have right now. So do you guys continue? And then if we get more, I will ask at the end.
Awesome. And one other thing, piggybacking on what Dr. Troutt said earlier too, regarding THC really being one of the main cannabinoids, sometimes causing that paranoia, patients who use CBD can actually kind of counteract some of those effects. So if you are experiencing that, that is something that you could try out.
Yeah, people that are more sensitive to THC products can benefit from using types of cannabis that have more of that balance of that CBD, or even dominant CBD strains, depending on their sensitivity and what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay, great. Good information. Thanks.
So here's a study that was real life experiences of medical cannabis treatment in autism, analysis of safety and efficacy. And it was 188 individuals with autism, and they were treated with cannabis oil type of products. And it was 30% CBD and 1.5% THC, so a 20-to-1 ratio, 20 parts CBD to 1 part THC. The majority of them were using, and that's a very common ratio for children to use that are dealing with autism and seizure disorders. And of these 188 patients, overall, more than 80% of the patients reported a significant improvement or moderate improvement in the Child Global Assessment scores. And things that, so 30% saw significant improvement, 53% saw moderate improvement, 6.4% saw slight improvement, and 8.6% reported no change. Now, this is not a one-size-fits-all medicine. Everybody's a little different in how they respond, and different doses are very, very important. So again, finding out what works for that individual. And they did note that in this study that it was a wide range of dosing they were using. So, but from anywhere from 15 milligrams of CBD and 0.75 milligrams of THC, up to 300 milligrams of CBD and 15 milligrams of THC 3 times a day. And they also noted, and I have seen this a lot in my practice as well, is that when there is severe sleep disorders and significant aggressive or violent behavior along with individuals with autism, that adding more THC in was very helpful for those individuals. And also realizing that it can take up to a couple months to really find that best dose for the individual. And families and patients report that over time, they continue to see improvements in their treatment. So it's important to really not give up in the beginning and really take the time to find that dose that's most effective for the individual. And then it's important to note that there are some adverse effects or side effects that are shown or have been seen. 6.6% report restlessness, 3.2 sleepiness, 3.2 the psychoactive effects were concerning for them. Increased appetite, 3.2%, digestion problems, 3.2%, dry mouth, 2.2, and then lack of appetite, 2.2. But it's also important to note that the side effects were mostly mild and typically transient. So they lasted for a short time and then resolved. 34.3% reported a decrease in other medications. And I know this is very important to families that are dealing with autism as far as the antipsychotics and the sedatives. Again, many families reporting that they really have a lot of side effects and interrupt that daily quality of life. So many were able to discontinue medications, including antipsychotics, anti-epileptics, antidepressants, hypnotics, and sedatives. And the researchers reported that these cannabis treatments appeared to be very well tolerated, safe, and an effective option to relieve symptoms associated with autism spectrum disorder. Here's another one that was reported in 60 children with severe behavioral problems that were assessed for tolerability and the efficacy of CBD-rich cannabis. And they saw improvement in behavioral outbreaks in 61% of the patients, improvements in communication problems in 47%, improvements in anxiety in 39%, in stress in 33%, and in disruptive behavior in 33%. 33% received less medication or lower dosage. In fact, 24% were able to stop taking medications, including antipsychotics. And 8%, though, we will note, did end up taking more medications during this study period. And in this one, the mean dose or the average was about 3.8 milligrams per kilogram body weight per day. So dosing that medicine based on the weight of the patient, and 0.9% milligram per kilogram a day THC, and they were receiving 3 daily doses. And we'll talk a little bit more about dosing later and have a chance to ask any questions about that. And they also noted some mild adverse effects as well, as far as sleep disturbances, irritability, loss of appetite. And with one individual with large amounts of THC, they did see a psychotic episode that was transient. So again, even though it's a very safe medicine, it's important to note that it also is quite powerful and needs to be respected for that. And starting off with very low dosing of the THC to find the individual's tolerances. So different forms of the medicine. Most of these cannabinoids are located on the flower of the cannabis plant, but we can extract those cannabinoids from the flower, and we call these concentrates or extracts, and they typically get up to 60 to 80% average cannabinoid content. So these are, again, very concentrated, very potent, and many people like it in that form so they can take much less of the medicine, and then it's quite versatile. You can mix it into foods or other types of products. You can make capsules as well out of these extractions. We can make formulations from it. We can mix these oil extractions into other oil carriers. Coconut oil, fractionated coconut oil, or what you may see called MCT, medium chain triglycerides. Those are the most common solutions that we see in a tincture bottle or a tincture form, because it mixes very well with cannabis oil and it's very stable. And these tincture bottles will have a dropper in it, and many of them now have little scorings or lines on it that tell you if it's a 0.5 milliliter or 3/4 or 1 milliliter. That really allows individuals to get very specific on the amount of the cannabinoids that they are dosing. And again, if anybody has any questions or wants to go through the math, we can do that here later, or we are always a resource for you if you have a specific product and you just need some help understanding the potency of that product or how many cannabinoids are in that tincture product. And tinctures are great because you can dose them drop by drop and really work up or titrate up that dose to find the best dose for the individual with the least chance of having any side effects. You can also hold tinctures under the tongue and absorb that medicine sublingually, which may kick in a little bit quicker than eating it orally or dosing orally. And it also, again, just has a little better absorbability in that form. Edible type products are also available, where we, again, mix these cannabinoids with food products. Now, edibles are nice because for compliance reasons, these cannabinoid oils are pretty strong tasting. So being able to mix them into other products like, gummies or chocolates, or, they definitely have their place for that. But you also have to be careful about the other nutritional additives that might be in some of these products if you're using it to dose daily. Like chocolates obviously may have a lot of sugar in it, or those types of things that you may need to keep your eye on. However, there are some great variations of these types of products that are sugar-free as well. And these will be very consistently labeled. Again, 2.5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, and 10 milligram THC doses are very common for these type of products. Topicals are also a form of the medicine that is available in Texas, and topicals are great for right where you put it. So joint pain, muscle pain, and typically don't have the systemic effects that are associated with these cannabis products. So many people like those because they don't have to, be concerned about the psychoactive effects that may come along with it, and they can still get localized relief, or they may use it as an add-on layering product. So oral dosing for just an overall systemic relief, and then topicals, directly to the spot. And then we are seeing some more transdermal type products that are mixed with other substances that are used to kind of drive it through the skin to try to get more of a systemic effect with topical applications. Metabolism. So I will mention this because as far as drug interactions with cannabis products, it's quite rare to see drug interactions clinically with cannabis products. And it's probably because people use the THC in such small amounts that we don't see a lot of that. But where I do see this is with children taking mini seizure medications, because they're metabolized in the same spot in the liver, and especially clobazam or onfi. That's one of the big kind of interactions that we do see, and it's not a big deal as long as the your physician is monitoring those levels of that medication when they start increasing those CBD doses, especially to those higher amounts. And then your physician will just adjust the dose of that seizure medication if necessary. But that's definitely one to keep the eye on. But like I said, it's typically quite rare to see drug interactions with cannabis. The other one I might keep an eye on would be with blood thinners as well. So if someone's on a lot of blood thinners, I may tell them to start their cannabis a couple weeks before they go in to have those levels tested of the blood, and the physician can adjust those. But like I said, it's still rare to see those interactions. So when we are talking about dosing and CBD dosing strategies, I can't say enough that everybody is an individual and responds differently. And cannabis is interesting because it works on so many different pathways of our body that it doesn't have necessarily a linear effects curve, meaning the more you take, the more improvement that you get. Sometimes lower doses even work better, interestingly enough. And that's why we always say start with a very low dose and then slowly work that dose up to find where that sweet spot is. And again, going back to CBD, I would say always consider bringing CBD along with THC, especially for individuals that are sensitive to that THC, because there are studies that suggest that it can offset some of the psychoactive effects of THC. Now, again, CBD has been shown to be very, very safe in very large doses. In fact, studies have been shown where they're dosing people up to 20 milligrams per kilogram a day body weight. That would be up to like 1,500 milligrams of CBD a day in someone my size. So very large doses. It shows that this is a very safe medicine. But interestingly enough, these whole plant CBD medicine, so not just a CBD isolate like a CBD pharmaceutical, but these whole CBD whole plant medicines have been shown to work better. In fact, this study showed that individuals using whole plant CBD medicines were getting the same or better results with only 6 milligrams of CBD per kilogram a day body weight versus 25 milligrams a day with these CBD isolate or pharmaceutical like CBD extractions. And then I always say, consider beginning somebody, especially if they're sensitive, around that 10 to 25 milligrams of CBD a day. And they can slowly work that up if they're not getting the results that they were looking for and don't have any side effects. But then when they start getting those higher doses, especially with seizure disorders and with autism, parents or families or patients will typically dose it by 1 milligram of CBD per the kilogram body weight of the patient per day. Or if you like pounds better, you can do it half a milligram of CBD per pound body weight of the individual a day. And this is just a way to really quantify or keep track what you're using and how it's working for you as an individual. And I typically say, wait at least a week to 2 weeks in between raising that dose, because again, the effects can improve over time as it's building up into the system. And as far as THC dosing strategies are concerned, typically 2.5 milligrams of THC for most people is tolerated very well. So 2.5 milligrams is a nice starting dose for most people. If we're worried about people that are a little more sensitive, or that person that's like, oh, I definitely don't want to feel psychoactive effects, maybe 1 milligram is a good place to start. Or even with children, we think about that. Interestingly enough, we think that children might be a lot more sensitive to THC, but they actually have less cannabinoid receptors in the brain, so as an adult. So interestingly enough, children can actually tolerate THC quite well. But either way, if it's a child or someone that's more sensitive, I would maybe that 1 milligram THC dose is a better place to start. And I always like starting dosing in the afternoon or evening, just in case you don't like the effects, the individual can sleep through it, or again, doesn't need to be out and about doing things. If that first dose did not provide the relief of symptoms they were looking for, but didn't have any side effects, after a couple of days, then they can double that dose and just kind of keep working it up like that until they find where they get the best results with that least chance of side effects. And again, most patients will typically dose 2 to 3 times a day. And then always realize, again, those larger doses of THC may be more likely to cause adverse events. That's why we want to be very careful and slow when we titrate up with THC. So start low and go slow is the mantra in dosing cannabis products. And other dosing strategies, again, we call them biphasic effects with these cannabinoids and biphasic effects, a couple of things. One thing it means is different amounts can cause totally different effects. Again, small doses typically has a nice sense of well-being, calmness, relaxation that goes along with it. But large doses of THC, as we've already discussed, can cause anxieties and paranoias in some people. So biphasic effects. And that amount is different for everybody, or can be. And then again, remember that sometimes lower doses are more effective. Sometimes people will overshoot that sweet spot and they think they need to keep going up. But in reality, if they come back down a little bit, they find a dose that actually starts working better. And that is quite interesting with cannabis. And even microdosing, very small doses of these cannabis medicines have provided great results for many people. So again, it is not a one-size-fits-all medication, and you have to get in there and find out what works best for the individual. And then we can also consider different types of cannabis, or different strains, or what we call, again, different chemo types. Maybe some THCA or CBDA might be more beneficial for that individual if they didn't get what they were looking for with the, again, the most common THC and CBD products, or CBG, CBN. So again, or various terpene profiles. And we can see, we're starting to see a lot better testing in the dispensaries where you can get laboratory analysis and see exactly what the cannabinoids and terpenoids are in that type of cannabis or product that you're using. And then finally, keep a journal. A journal is the best way to really keep track of exactly what you're using and how it's working for that individual and over time. And I typically tell people that I work with to keep track of all the different things that you're hoping to get relief from. So if it's seizures, then look at the amount of seizures or the severity of seizures or type of seizures. Is it a little bit better now we started using it? Is it a little bit worse? Anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least severe, 10 being the most severe. And again, really keeping track of all of those different symptoms to tease out how it's working for you. And then share those journals with your physician. So even if your physician doesn't want to manage your cannabis use, you can provide them these journals to keep them in the loop so they can follow along and again, just be part of that process and potentially help wean off other medications that individuals may not need anymore if they're getting benefits with these cannabis types of medicines. And I included some great references for all you science journal nerds like me that want to get in there and do a little extra reading. And then again, thank you so much for allowing us to come out and chat with you guys about medical cannabis today. And hopefully we'll have some more questions we can answer today, but if not, I know this is a lot of information. Sometimes it takes time to process, and sometimes you don't even realize you have the questions until you're, getting your card and getting into the dispensary. So we are definitely an ongoing resource for you as you are considering this or working through the process.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Troutt. Okay, we do actually have we've got 3 or 4 questions. So one of them was about concerns that there are companies out there claiming to, kind of make these products, but are they putting harmful chemicals in them? And is there a way to make sure that kind of, I guess they said consuming correct products, but I think they mean they're thinking safe products,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big concern, even in the nutraceutical industry and our vitamins and supplements. Third-party testing is definitely the gold standard of finding out exactly what's in there and what's not in there. So I would always look for that. Do some research on the company that you are getting those products from as well. Be a good consumer. But that's also the nice part about these regulated medical cannabis programs. And especially when we're coming from it being prohibited and people were having to, buy it on the street for so many years with having no access to truly knowing what was in it or not. So most of these cannabis programs regulate third-party testing and they have very strict regulatory standards as far as how it's produced. So we can definitely have a lot more confidence in these regulated cannabis programs, knowing that there are not other additives in there that shouldn't be in there, or again, other substances of concern, and also knowing exactly what these constituents are, especially with complex botanical medicines like cannabis, that different plant types may have different constituents that may provide different medical benefits for you. So yeah, looking for those third-party test results are a very important part of that process, and also being a good consumer and knowing who you're doing business with.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks. And then, so we had a question from Facebook, or kind of more of a comment, and then it ties into a question that I was wondering about the medications and doctors. But the comment was that someone said they feel like physicians here in Texas are so conservative, or they choose not to use a more natural approach. It can be hard to find a doctor that takes pain seriously, and sometimes it can end up getting you labeled as fibromyalgia or something else. So I was wondering if you've seen that. And then another thing I was curious about, I just was wondering this when you were discussing it, is it hard to find a doctor that'll work with you, like for seizure disorder, for example, and you're on traditional meds and then you're trying this? Are doctors pretty willing to work with patients on the changeover or trying this?
Yeah, those are great questions. The first one talking about physicians not taking pain seriously and that type of thing, and that's a tough one. And part of what's got us into that situation is opiate medicines and drug-seeking behavior with opiates. And the concern with that is that opiates have a high tolerance to them, and people typically have to take more and more to get the same results that they used to. So there's a lot of addictive qualities that go along with opiates. So as a result, and especially with as toxic as they are, and now everybody knows the crisis that we have on our hands with opiates, that doctors have gotten a little shy or conservative or really concerned about prescribing those opiates, and especially our pain doctors. And it has affected that relationship with their patient about not taking patients serious about pain, which is unfortunate, because people dealing with pain need their medications and these treatments to, again, help them manage it. And so we're really pleased that we're seeing the laws change, and that cannabis can be another tool in the toolbox for individuals that are dealing with very severe amounts of pain. But the pain management doctors are the worst as far as opening up to cannabis, because for so long it has been considered one of those illicit type of drugs that they would look for. And many of them still won't treat an individual with opiates and cannabis at the same time, which is unfortunate, because studies are showing that they synergize very well together, and they can allow people to use less of those opiate pain meds. So we've got a lot of work to do to repair that doctor-patient relationship around pain and that conversation around pain. As far as cannabis doctors are concerned, and finding a doctor to help manage your cannabis use, that is still a very tough one, because it is a Schedule I substance still on the federal level, and many doctors are worried that they'll get in trouble. And so that is why these programs are set up the way they are. These state programs, the doctor does not prescribe cannabis. What they do is they write a certification that an individual has one of the qualifying conditions. So they certify that they're allowed to use it under the state law. But many of those doctors still do not want to manage the patient's cannabis use or tell them how much to take or where to get it, because they're still in fear of the federal laws and just, all that's surrounded with that. And the first stage, or when it first comes into a state like Texas and throughout the South, it's a little more conservative. Those physicians are a bit more conservative and they don't want to weigh into it. In other states, once they realize, after a decade passes, they realize the sky isn't falling, the physicians aren't getting in trouble, and it is a wonderful medicine for their patient. We see them getting much more willing to manage those patients and medicines and have those conversations. So I think there's going to be a time frame in Texas that we see that it's going to take for many physicians to be comfortable with it. With that being said, if you cannot find physicians there in Texas that are willing, especially with complex medical conditions like seizure disorders and autism, I know a couple of wonderful physicians that have been doing it for over a decade that specialize in pediatrics as well. They're in other states, but they will do Zoom visits and help manage. So we can get you the resources that you need if you don't feel comfortable, again, doing it without that type of guidance. And we are here as a resource as well to answer any questions you may have along the way.
And just to add on to that too, if you do a quick Google search for Texas cannabis physicians, you'll see the CURT registry, which is Cannabis Use Registry of Texas, and you can search for physicians. There's, again, close to 800. So you will hopefully be able to find one close to you. If not, Texas does allow for telemedicine, which is a really great thing, especially in a state that is as large as Texas is, especially for the patients in rural areas.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to interview your physicians. Find
Yes.
a physician that fits your needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, we have one last question, and it's about autism and sort of more when you have maybe not really severe behaviors, maybe it's like some kind of level 1 autism, either kids or adults who mostly just have social anxiety. How does that help? Have you got experience with that, or are there any studies on that or anecdotal kind of information?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of, as we talked about with the presentation of autism, we see disruptions in this endocannabinoid system, or dysregulations in this endocannabinoid system. And I do believe that using these cannabinoids to supplement that endocannabinoid system can be very helpful on many levels. And again, most of our patients that are using cannabis, especially with autism, the way they're dosing it, they're not seeing the psychoactive effects that are, people associate with, heavy use of cannabis or heavy THC with cannabis. So I think it can be a win-win using lesser amounts of cannabis, CBD dominant amounts of cannabis for those individuals that you're talking about. And we have absolutely seen patients or individuals getting great improvements in quality of life and improvements in those milestones and markers and anxieties and those things that were mentioned or asked about. So like I said, I do believe with autism or with these imbalances in the nervous system, considering cannabis as a supplementation of this endocannabinoid system is a very great tool in the toolbox.
Great, thank you. And then last question, if people do have questions about anything you've discussed or want to talk more, can they just email you directly on the email on your slide?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. All right. And then we're also happy to connect people can message us on Facebook if you don't see this, or if you don't want to scroll through the end of this, but we're happy to connect you guys with Trulieve as well, or with Dr. Troutt. And so, yeah, we have a navigating autism team. We provide free information and referrals statewide. So for this, but any autism topic or help that is needed. So I think that's the end of our questions, but is there anything else you guys wanted to add? This has been good.
You're muted, Zach.
I'll get that eventually, it's only been a few years of using virtual, but no, just wanted to add, again, thank you very much, Jackie, Alicia, the Autism Society of Texas. It's been great working with you all. Very hopeful that we'll be in Texas soon and can continue doing these webinars and being a resource for patients in Texas. If you would like to visit our website, find more information on cannabis, you can do so at trulieve.com. We have a lot of great blogs on there that share a lot of information that Dr. Troutt covered today and other topics as well. So, you may know someone who qualifies as a patient in Texas, and sharing information is always a good thing.
Excellent. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was really interesting. You guys presented a lot of good information, so we really appreciate having you. And I'm going to wrap this up now and end the live feed, but it'll stay on Facebook and we'll be putting in our YouTube so people can continue to access this. All right. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day.